When I was in high school, my girlfriend's parents would let me stay overnight on the weekends so long as I slept in the RV that was parked in the back of the house. I've done it multiple times. My girlfriend would come and sit with me outside for a while until she got tired. Then she would go inside to fall asleep. I would listen to my Walkman while I tried to fall asleep. I remember one night, I was having trouble falling asleep, which wasn't so unusual for me. But as I lay there, I started to notice an unfamiliar background. It was a sound noise, and when I removed my headphone, I realized that it sounded like people outside the RV were having a loud discussion. But the number of voices started to multiply and get louder and louder until it was unbearable. I searched around and around, peering out the windows, but nobody was there. I was very shaken at this point. I decided to run into the house and sleep in the living room and try to explain myself in the morning. Problem was, every time I got about 6 feet away from the RV, there would be a flash of white and I would open my eyes and find myself back in the RV. Now, I was nearly having a panic attack. I called my girlfriend on the phone and she could hear how terrified I was, so she told me she was coming outside to get me. I heard the back door sliding open to her house. I heard the walk across the deck, down the stairs, across the garden stones, and finally, her hand fumbles on the RV door. But when it swung open and no one was there. Now, I was pretty much in tears when suddenly felt the presence of something behind me. I turned around and found this massive, red aura hovering there. I was overcome with this immense sense of death and dread, and I felt like I could not breathe, like I was being strangled. I remember feeling this aura or energy, and it was killing me, like absorbing my life force, and I don't know if that makes any sense. I dropped to my knees and realized that if I did not break free from this fast, I was most certainly going to die. I don't know where I found this strength from, but I willed myself back to my feet, slammed the RV door, and bolted for the house. This time, I actually got inside. I hollered for my girlfriend. She came downstairs with her mom in much confusion. I explained everything that happened, getting especially angry that my girlfriend never came outside like she promised. She said, "We never spoke on the phone and she does not know what I'm talking about." But when we compared our phone calls, mine showed a 1 and 25-second conversation completed to the phone while hers showed nothing. That's when her and her mom started taking me seriously and began to look quite scared themselves. The rest of the night was uneventful. Her mom let me try to sleep on the couch, but try as I might, I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I would see a small circle of intense, burning white light. This is going to be a bit out there for most people, but what I'm about to type out is true, and it actually happened to me. If you choose not to believe me, that's fine. I would not expect you to. Just don't be a jerk about it. This all happened around late May to early June in 2017. I live out in Kentucky and have been here my whole life. I saved up some money and bought my first AR-style rifle, Ruger AR-556 for anyone who cares. I have wanted one for a while but never had the money to get one, so as soon as I got the chance I grabbed it. I needed to sight my gun in after I bought it. My family owns 20 plus acres of land, so I don't go to gun ranges because, first of all, people are dumb and our local ones have bullet holes in the ceilings. And second, I prefer shooting on our own land. I've managed to get a Magpul D60 drum magazine at Gander Mountain because they were having a going out of business sale. So I guess I really was going to sight in the gun and test out the magazine's reliability. I barely had the magazine out of the box and had not gotten a chance to shoot it yet. I looked up a bunch of reviews and couldn't find any that had the problems that mine did that day. This is where things start getting odd. My family has owned this land I shoot on for decades. Nothing weird has ever happened out here that I know of. And I have taken people to the spot that this happened at, and nothing has recreated the feelings I had that day. I grabbed my gun, the drum, 20 rounds of ammo and went outside to cross over our field. To get to the field, I have to go through a barbed wire fence and about 300 feet of wooded area. The moment I crossed over the barbed wire, something felt off. I have been over there 1,000 times before, and like I said, nothing weird has ever happened down there, and I've never had any experiences there. Something just felt off that day. Like someone wanted me to leave. I kept going though because nothing has ever happened like I mentioned before. I just thought maybe I was getting paranoid or the wind and air pressure were just right, giving an eerie feeling. I walked deeper into the woods. The further I get, the stronger the feeling gets. I feel like I'm being watched, like something nearby is just staring into my soul. I keep going. I get halfway and this feeling is borderline unbearable. I stop dead in my tracks and think to myself, something's definitely off. Like I've said 1,000 times, nothing like this has ever happened before. I know something's going on. When I grabbed my ammo when I left home, I did not load it in the magazine because I wanted to hurry and get to the field, so I could set everything up. This is where I listen to the gut feeling. I stop dead in my tracks and load the magazine with the 20 rounds I bought. Something told me that something was not right and I needed to be ready just in case. Something is watching me. I don't know what it is or where it's at. As I'm loading my magazine, out of nowhere I smell something dead. It just came out of nowhere. I've been standing there for 2 minutes with no scent. Then, all of a sudden, it smells like a month-old rotting carcass is behind me. I look around and directly behind me is a mangled animal that, aside from the smell, looks nearly fresh. It was so mangled. The only thing that gave me a clue as to what animal it was the color of its fur, which was a white-gray color. It was a rabbit or a possum. The smell did not go along with the age of this. Whatever I caught the stench of, that wasn't it. I finished loading the magazine, immediately stuck it in my gun, and held the bolt open the way if I tripped, my gun would not fire accidentally. For some reason, I kept going. I'm nearly out of the woods. I can see the field. I'm going dead ahead. That's when it happened. This entire time I've been walking alongside a creek. The creek turns to the left as you approach the field I was going to. As I got to the turn in the creek, I heard a large splash in the water. I turned quickly. What I seen, I'll never forget. This thing was easily 9 feet tall and stood on 2 legs. Aside from the water splash, it was dead silent. It had very long arms and legs. It was a slight brown color, almost the color of a deer. It had a brownish look to it, but not that dark. Maybe it was actually gray and the lighting made it look like shades of brown. But it looked like skin, not fur. Perhaps the freakiest thing about it was the size. It looked severely malnourished. Very skinny, tight skin across its body. Imagine taking a fully grown man that only weighs 120 pounds and stretching him out to be 9 feet tall. But he stays the same width and doesn't get skinnier as you stretch him. It had somewhat of an odd walk too, but this could have been caused by the mud near the creek bed. It never faced me, so I did not get a chance to see it from the front. It just kept walking and never turned around. This incredibly scared me. I was 99% sure I knew what that thing was. I tried to close the bolt of my gun to chamber around, just in case this thing turned around to fight. I had no intention of shooting this thing, unless it gave a sign it was going to attack. If it was what I thought it was, the gun wouldn't have mattered anyways. When I tried to chamber around, the magazine would not let the round go off. The force of the bolt closing would break your finger if you were to close it on it. I've been loading and unloading the magazine all day before, just to loosen the spring to make it easier to load in the future. I could take the rounds out with my hand, but when I came across this ducking thing, somehow, it decides it wants to keep the bullet. By now, the thing is gone and I'm basically sitting there with my blank in my hand. That magazine never worked right again. I kept it a few more days but had to send it back because I was tearing up my ammo. It would hold onto bullets so tight, the bolt tried to close and just scratched the gouge so deep in the casing, powder was almost leaking out. After the animal walked off, I realized if I had shot, I would have deafened myself. It caught me so off guard, I almost fired a 5.56 round in a heavily wooded area without ear protection. I had brought some with me but did not have it on. Once I hiked through the forest to some old castle on a hill. To get there, I needed to cross a bridge that goes over a 20-meter deep canyon. I've been there 1,000 times, as I used to live in the area. This particular time, I started to get a weird feeling as soon as I stepped in the forest. It got stronger and stronger until it was pure fear. I thought I must have eaten something wrong or so, because there was no reason whatsoever to be afraid. So I tried to ignore it and went on. Right before I stepped onto the bridge, that weird feeling acted up, so wildly I almost turned back. Again, I convinced myself I was being stupid and made it to the middle of the bridge. One has quite a nice view from that position into the forest and rock formations below. So as always, I stopped and looked down to the right side of the bridge. Then I turned to the left. But before I could look down, that feeling did not let me. At that point, I really thought I must have been going crazy. But I obeyed. I did not look down and made my way to the castle ruin complex that started right behind the bridge. Been there for 15 minutes when some police officers arrived. Started to scream at me to come down. As I was climbing the old walls, they interrogated me who I was, what I was doing there, and what I saw on my way to the castle. How long I've been there, and how come I did not see the dead guy under the bridge on the left side. So apparently, he jumped shortly before I arrived. I guess they thought I was involved or a suicide buddy of his, and I was about to jump off the ruined walls myself. Turns out, I can sense dead people, or whatever. I had a couple experiences with that warning system. Weird. I work at several attractions for the Big Mouse that has tourist destinations in Orlando and Anaheim. When I first started working for the Mouse, I learned that most of the buildings were haunted in one form or another. Generally, I take this stuff with a grain of salt. Show me the science to prove it, then I'll believe you. I've had 2 separate encounters with 2 ghosts and 2 different attractions. And let me tell you, I believe a hell of a lot more now. Experience 1. In a slow-moving journey through time, you come across a scene where a famous painter is lying on his back, painting the ceiling of a building. There is a ladder going up to the scene, and the rumor was that a maintenance guy had a heart attack during his shift one night and dropped off the base of the ladder. No one found him until the next morning. He was already dead. It became a tradition upon closing the ride for the night to tell him goodnight, or else havoc would come down upon the ride the next day. Silly, I know, but we all played along. I never really believed it. Everything seemed very circumstantial. On one particularly slow day, I was riding through the attraction when all of a sudden it stopped in the scene I mentioned earlier. Now, if you've ridden this ride, you'll know it's basically a train car with 2 rows. Well, as far as I could see ahead of me, there was no one. As far as I could see behind me, there was no one. The ride system is pretty sophisticated. When someone hops out, there are pressure-sensitive mats on one side that trigger the ride to stop, and show on our ride display screen exactly where it is. On the other side of the ride vehicle, there are photoelectric beams that also give the exact location of this intrusion, as we call them. Now, we stop this ride pretty often. Someone takes too long to get into the ride vehicle, stop it, and then start it back up again. Well, in this case, they started speaking over the intercom in the entire ride. That usually means someone is out of the vehicle somewhere on the ride. A few minutes into sitting there, I start to hear keys jingling. 2 sets headed directly in my direction. I'm completely alone, and here comes my fellow Mouse employees looking rather concerned. They ask me, "Did you jump out?" Of course, I have not, to which I told them, They look at each other and back at me, both looking from side opposite directions they've come from. Did you see anyone? I hadn't. It was just me. The mat and the I-beam were both triggered in this scene. We all sort of stare at each other and sort of whisper the ghost name at each other. They leave. Within 5 minutes we're moving again. I never rode that ride alone again. Experience 2. Another attraction I work at is a motion simulator that spins and uses a G-force to simulate space flight. When the attraction first opened, there was only one option. The story goes that a mother brought her child in to experience the attraction, and when the attraction finished, the child was unresponsive. Emergency services were called, and it was later discovered during the child's autopsy that he had an undiagnosed heart condition. This much is true. There is a fellow mouse employee that was working on that day and remembers the story. Multiple other mouse employees have looked up the story, myself included. Since then, it's been said the ghost of the little boy likes to hang around in the ride where he died. There are multiple reports of hearing him laughing during opening procedures, of him calling out for his mom, of the sensors going off before the ride starts upon checking the cameras, there being stuff in front of it that definitely wasn't there before. Since we all check the cameras before the ride starts, again, I'm usually very skeptical about this sort of thing. One morning, I'm scheduled an opening shift, which doesn't normally happen due to my low seniority. I show up and go to open room number 3, which is the room where this little boy met his tragic end. During opening checks, there's one person in each 4 rooms, all completing the same task. Ride rooms 1 and 2 are connected by a small closet, and ride rooms 3 and 4 are similarly connected by another small closet. We usually don't chat in the morning with the person opening the other ride, since we're all trying to get through our checklist as quickly as possible. I get to the part where I'm about to run the ride and check for errors at the end of my checklist, and go in to start closing up my vehicles. It gets pretty loud in there, to the point where I need to get someone's attention. We have to raise our voices. I start to check my ride vehicles and close the first 2 of 10. That's when I start hearing a laugh. A laughing little boy. At this point, I'm pretty sure it's one of the others playing a joke on me, so I move on. I go to the next 2 and check them. They're good, so I close them. I hear the laughter again, closer and louder this time. I turn around to check over my shoulders, and there's a faint flicker of movement from the corner of my eye. So I go to check and see what it was. There's nothing there. At this point, I'm spooked. I hurry and check the rest of my ride's vehicles, close them up, and do a final check of my ride room before closing everything up and settling the ride to start. I hear the giggling again. Turn around like last time, and there's a faint shimmer disappearing down the hallway. Of course, I chase it to see what was there. Turns out, nothing again. So I go to the other ride room to see what was opening over there. A girl that I've worked with quite a bit before. She normally opens and tells me she had similar experiences when it looks like someone's watching you, or just out of the corner of your eye there's no one there. And the laughing sometimes gets to be just downright creepy. Multiple people have encountered this little boy, various times, all during the day, mostly under the conclusion that he's lonely. I bought my house in 2008. It's an old Sears and Roebuck's kit house, built in 1923. When I purchased it from the realtor, she said that an old retired city utilities worker had been the only owner of it before I bought it, and she said that he maintained it fairly well. She wasn't wrong either. The only thing it needed was a new roof. I kind of wondered why it had sat vacant for a few years. I found out why a few months after buying it. While moving my stuff into the place I was storing everything at, I would need immediately into the basement. It was a finished basement, so it wasn't too awful. But I kept hearing noises while I was down there sorting my stuff into things I'll need soon. And it can wait piles. It sounded as if someone was pacing from my kitchen to the front door and back. Then, a few weeks later, I was down there grabbing some things. I heard a piano above me playing. Not a grand piano, but a piano you might see in church. Not an organ, but a smallish piano. I could even tell you what song it was. How Great Thou Art. I did some research on this place. Turns out the retired city utilities worker had died in the hot tub. It wasn't anything horrific. I talked to his daughter. She just happened to work as a pharmacy technician at the CVS near the house. She told me he had a massive heart attack while he was in the tub. She came over for dinner and found him there later that night. I expressed my sincere sympathy for having to deal with such a traumatic experience. The very next Saturday, I was out doing some yard work and this little old man came up to me. I shut down the weed eater and we had a chat. He said he used to live here and he wanted to look at the place one last time before he moved away. He was pretty feeble looking. I wasn't intimidated. I invited him inside for a glass of tea and to check it out. And he politely declined. Said the outside looked beautiful and he was certain the inside looked just as good. He expressed his gratitude that someone responsible had purchased the place. He walked away. I started to pull the ripcord on the weed eater and then thought. I wanted to say something to the man. To my surprise, he was already gone. Weird. I did not see any cars drive by, and I was positive he could not have walked down the block and around the corner in 8 seconds. It's just not possible. The noises I heard in the house went away after that. I think the little old man I talked to was the ghost in my home. He wanted to be sure I was going to take care of the house he bought and built. I still own and I still live there. I hope I'm taking care of it as good as he would like.